During our annual Galentine's sleepover, I was painting this quiet girl, Annalise's nails, when my boyfriend Trevor texted that I looked desperate in my Instagram story and said his best friend Tata would never post herself looking like a pick-me. When I mentioned his girl best friend Tata to the room, Annalise dropped the nail polish and it shattered everywhere as she started shaking. She pulled out her phone to show us 2 years of messages from my boyfriend calling her Tata, saying she was made for him, and hundreds of photos he'd secretly taken of her just living her life. We were having our annual Galentine's sleepover at Rose's house. 20 girls, most from different friend groups, all crammed in her basement with face masks, matching PJs, living our best lives. I was painting this quiet girl Annalise's nails when my phone was buzzing with texts from Trevor. Why'd you post that story? You look desperate. Tata would never post herself looking like a pick-me. My friend Mia grabbed my phone. Girl, who the fuck is Tata? His sister? I was so embarrassed that I wanted to crawl into a hole and die. No, it's his girl best friend. IDK, it's fine, I trust him. I lied. Annalise's hands started shaking, like actually trembling. Wait, what's your boyfriend's full name? Trevor Teal? Why? Annalise literally dropped the nail polish. It shattered everywhere. I'm Tata. That's what he calls me. He's been stalking me for 2 years. Dead. Silence. Then chaos. She pulled out her phone and the receipts were insane. You're so perfect, Tata. Those yoga pants today drove me crazy. My girlfriend could never look like you do. And the photos. So many photos. All of her just living her life. Every single girl abandoned their face masks and crowded around Annalise's phone. The texts got progressively more unhinged. I think about your body constantly. You were made for me, FRL. I literally wanted to puke. I felt my entire world shatter. I had no fucking idea. He said you guys were childhood best friends. I've been telling him to leave me alone since sophomore year. That's when the vibe changed. You could literally feel it. 20 girls who barely knew each other suddenly became sisters. We're ending him, Rose said. Her voice was scary calm. Tonight, someone suggested Annalise finally text him back. Get him to prove his love, Jess said with his evil smile. These psychos will literally do anything. Annalise's hands were shaking as she typed, I've been thinking. Maybe I've been too harsh. His response was instantaneous. 27 missed calls in 10 minutes. Then, Tata baby, I knew you'd realize we're meant to be. Tell him to prove it, Anna whispered. Make him work for it. Make him desperate. In the next 3 hours, I watched the man I thought I'd marry write Annalise's name on his forehead and bark like a dog. Do the I'm a little teapot dance while saying he was sorry. Not to me, but to Annalise for not kissing her sooner. Within an hour, he'd sent everything they asked for. No dignity left. The desperation made me gag. The girls screen recorded every single video, made copies, created compilations. The room erupted. Everyone started talking at once. Sarah pulled out her pink laptop. Ladies, we need to be strategic about this. My sister works IT for the school district, one girl said quietly. She has admin access to everything. I have keys to the AV room from being in student council. I run the morning announcements. It was like watching puzzle pieces click together. Half the room had some kind of school access we could use. We stayed up all night planning, fueled by Red Bull and pure rage. The girl with the IT sister would handle the main network. Student council girl would get us into the AV room. 3 girls who worked in the cafeteria for work study would make sure those screens were ready. Library aid girls had their area covered. We edited everything into one 3-minute compilation. Him barking, him crawling, the teapot dance, all of it. We agreed not to snitch on each other, no matter what happened. Monday morning, 8:45 a.m. Trevor's AP literature presentation was first period. That's when we heard the sound of a human barking on the intercom, followed by begging over and over. Then came the visual of Trevor with Annalise's puppy written on his forehead, pouting like a little girl. The library went next, the gym, the main lobby, even the smartboard in his AP lit room where his teacher was trying to start class. The morning announcements picked up the audio feed. Every speaker, every hallway. You could hear him meowing from the parking lot. And when he couldn't find the remote control, he started throwing water at the screen to try and turn it off, which made us girls laugh even harder. Like, sorry, but we actually ate. The principal and security found him hyperventilating behind the portables. But Annalise was already there with printed evidence. And me, and all 20 girls from the sleepover, slowly walking out from different buildings where we'd been stationed. The damage was done, but that wasn't even the best part, because Annalise convinced me to tell Trevor's mom everything, and she was angry. Enough to destroy her own son. She called the school herself that Sunday night and told them everything she'd found on his computer. Monday morning, the cafeteria screens were still frozen on Trevor crawling on all fours with Annalise's puppy written across his forehead in permanent marker. Principal Edwards burst through the main doors with 3 security guards right as Trevor started pounding on the AV room door. His face was purple and sweaty, and he kept screaming about getting the password to shut everything down. All 20 of us girls stood there with our phones out recording every second of his meltdown. The meowing sounds were still playing through every speaker in the building on repeat. Trevor saw me in the crowd and completely lost it. He shoved past 2 freshmen and charged straight at me screaming that I'd ruined his whole life. Security grabbed him before he could reach us, but not before the entire hallway heard him call me a jealous bitch. The meowing got louder somehow, and then the teapot dance started playing on the gym screens too. Annalise stepped forward with this thick folder she'd been carrying all morning. Her hands were shaking so bad she almost dropped it. Principal Edwards told security to take Trevor to the nurse's office while he led us girls to the conference room. Annalise spread 2 years of screenshots across the big table like she was dealing cards. Hundreds of messages filled the surface. Photos he'd taken of her walking to class or eating lunch or just existing. The principal's face went white when he started reading Trevor's messages about what he wanted to do to her body. Some of them were so bad that Principal Edwards had to sit down and take off his glasses. Trevor's parents showed up within the hour looking confused and angry. His dad immediately started threatening to sue the school and calling us lying attention seekers. But his mom Diane went completely silent when she saw the evidence spread across the table. She picked up page after page of her son's messages to Annalise. When Principal Edwards showed her the compilation video on his laptop, she covered her mouth and ran to the bathroom. We could hear her throwing up from the conference room. His dad kept yelling about lawyers until Diane came back and told him to shut up and look at what their son had done. Detective Rivera from Riverside PD showed up around noon with another officer. She examined every piece of evidence with this intense focus while asking Annalise super specific questions. When did the messages start exactly? How often did he follow her? Did she ever feel physically threatened? Rose explained how we'd distributed the video using only content Trevor had created himself. The detective nodded and said we hadn't broken any laws since Trevor had voluntarily made and sent everything. She took photos of all the screenshots and made copies of the video files on a flash drive. That evening I sat in my childhood bedroom staring at 3 years of photos with Trevor on my phone. The boy making silly faces at the camera wasn't the same person who'd been stalking Annalise for 2 years. My phone had 47 missed calls from him and over 200 texts. Some were threats about ruining my life, others were apologies and begging me to take him back. A few were straight up marriage proposals saying we were meant to be together forever. Mom brought me chamomile tea and sat on my bed while I cried harder than I'd ever cried before. She held me and told me none of this was my fault. fault. The next day, school was absolute chaos. Someone had leaked the full compilation to WorldStar and TikTok overnight, and it already had 2 million views. Parents were flooding the principal's office demanding to know how a stalker had been allowed in school. The school board called an emergency meeting for that afternoon. Someone made a remix using Trevor's actual barking sounds as the beat, and it was going viral on every platform. Kids were doing the teapot dance in the hallways and barking at each other as jokes. That night at 2 in the morning, I woke up to rocks hitting my bedroom window. Trevor was standing in our front yard screaming that I owed him after 3 years together. Dad called 911 while Mom recorded everything from the front door. Trevor picked up our garden gnome and threw it straight through the living room window. Glass went everywhere and our alarm started blaring. He kept screaming that we were hiding his real girlfriend Annalise inside our house. The cops found him crying in our driveway saying Annalise was being held hostage by my family. They arrested him for vandalism and harassment and violating the emergency restraining order Annalise had filed the day before. At his arraignment the next morning, he pleaded not guilty to everything. His dad posted $10,000 bail while his mom sat in the back row crying. The judge ordered no contact with me or Annalise or any of the girls from the sleepover. Trevor smirked at us from the defendant's table like none of this was serious. The school implemented new safety protocols immediately after the arraignment. Trevor was suspended pending expulsion hearings next month. Security guards started escorting Annalise between every single class. They changed all her classroom locations to keep them on opposite sides of campus. There's something really curious about how 20 girls from different friend groups just happened to have exactly the right connections to pull this off. IT access, AV room keys, morning announcements. Some kids blamed us for ruining Trevor's future over what they called just a crush, but other students started sharing their own stories about his creepy behavior they'd ignored before. Girls talked about him following them to their cars or showing up at their jobs or taking photos without asking. The next Monday, I walked into school feeling like I had a target on my back. Kids stared at me in the hallway and I could hear them whispering as I passed. Some girl from my math class grabbed my arm and said I was brave for exposing him. Another guy from Trevor's soccer team called me a vindictive bitch who ruined his life over nothing. My AP literature teacher pulled me aside before class and told me she needed someone else to do their presentation since recent events had disrupted the schedule. I couldn't even eat in the cafeteria anymore. Every time I saw a tall guy with dark hair, my whole body would tense up thinking it was Trevor. I started eating lunch in my car with the doors locked, checking my mirrors every few seconds. Mia found me there on Tuesday, scrolling through my phone with shaking hands. She grabbed it from me and her face went white. Trevor had made fake Instagram accounts and was still watching Annalise. The usernames were all inside jokes like Tata Watcher 2024 and Annalise Destiny that only he would think of. Each account had saved hundreds of her photos going back to middle school. Pictures from her 8th grade graduation, freshman homecoming, random selfies she'd posted years ago. Rose's IT sister came over that night and helped us screenshot everything before the accounts started disappearing one by one. We watched them vanish in real time like he knew we'd found them. A week later, Mrs. Teal called me. Everyone told me not to meet with her, but I went anyway. She was waiting at a coffee shop with a cardboard box on the table, and her hands were shaking so bad she could barely hold her cup. Inside the box were things she'd found hidden in Trevor's room. Printed photos of Annalise at the grocery store, at Starbucks, walking her dog, a journal where he'd written pages and pages about their future together, their wedding, their kids' names, 3 USB drives labeled with dates. Mrs. Teal kept apologizing and crying, saying she knew something was wrong but didn't want to believe her son could be like this. I grabbed one of the USBs and plugged it into my laptop right there in the coffee shop. The first video was Annalise at Target looking at shampoo while Trevor's voice narrated what she was thinking. The next one showed him following her home from school, talking about how perfect she looked in her track uniform. There were hundreds of files, photos through her bedroom window, videos of her at restaurants with her family. One folder had pictures from 4 years ago when she was in 8th grade. Mrs. Teal ran to the bathroom and I could hear her throwing up. When she came back, we drove straight to the police station. Detective Rivera took one look at the evidence and added more charges: stalking, invasion of privacy, criminal harassment. He said the USB drives showed Trevor's behavior went back 4 years, not 2 like we thought. Annalise had been his lab partner in 8th grade biology, and that's when it started. Mrs. Teal handed over a folder of psychiatric records from when Trevor was 12. He'd done the same thing to a girl at his old school before they moved to Riverside. The pattern was identical. 2 weeks later, everything got worse. Trevor's dad hired some expensive defense attorney who filed motions saying our video was illegally obtained and defamatory. He claimed we conspired to humiliate Trevor and manufactured evidence of stalking. The local news picked it up with a headline, "Cyberbullying or Justice. Local girl's vigilante video goes viral." Reporters started showing up at school trying to interview us. Meanwhile, Annalise was falling apart. She finally broke down in the counselor's office and showed us what she'd been carrying for 2 years. Pepper spray on her keychain, a taser in her backpack, 3 different tracking apps on her phone to make sure Trevor wasn't following her. She couldn't sleep, couldn't shower without checking the locks 5 times, couldn't be alone without panicking. The counselor said she had severe PTSD and needed immediate therapy. Then came the school board meeting. Trevor's dad stood up in front of everyone and called us a gaggle of girls who destroyed his son's future over normal teenage feelings. He said we were a feminist mob who couldn't handle a boy having a crush. Rose's mom lost it completely. She screamed that his son terrorized children while he enabled it. Parents started taking sides and yelling at each other. Security had to separate them while the whole meeting turned into chaos. 3 days later, Principal Edwards called us into his office. Trevor had violated his suspension by showing up at school during lunch. Security footage showed him trying to break into Annalise's locker with a crowbar. When they caught him, he had a love letter, a necklace with her initials, and a USB labeled "Our Song" in his backpack. The USB had a 47-minute video of him talking to printed photos of Annalise like she was there with him. 3 weeks after the sleepover, everything exploded. Someone sent UC Berkeley the compilation video and all the news articles about Trevor. They revoked his acceptance immediately. His dad threatened to sue the school, sue us, sue whoever leaked the information. Then Trevor posted this insane manifesto on Reddit claiming he was the real victim of cancel culture and feminazi persecution. He said we ruined his life because he dared to love someone. The post got 10,000 comments before Reddit deleted it, but screenshots were everywhere. Detective Rivera called an emergency meeting at the police station 2 days later. She had printed out every single screenshot from Trevor's manifesto and spread them across the conference table. Her face was serious as she pointed to specific phrases he'd used about taking back what was his and making people pay. She explained that his language matched patterns they see in people who commit violence against women. The FBI's threat assessment team wanted to interview all 20 of us from the sleepover. What started as teenage drama now had federal attention, and Detective Rivera assigned a patrol car to check on Annalise's house every hour. She strongly suggested I stay with relatives immediately. That night, I packed everything I could fit in 2 suitcases and moved in with my aunt across town. The first few few nights I barely slept at all. Every car that passed too slowly made my heart pound. Every notification on my phone made me jump. I changed my routes to work and school every day. I installed cameras on my aunt's porch and backyard. I deleted all my social media accounts after finding weird messages from accounts with no pictures. 2 weeks in, my mom found me sleeping in the closet with a baseball bat clutched in my hands. Rose organized a support group meeting for all the sleepover girls at her house the following Saturday. We sat in her living room sharing how the situation had affected our lives. Sarah couldn't focus on her college applications anymore. Jess's anxiety was so bad she'd missed 12 days of school. Anna's parents wanted to transfer her to a private school an hour away. We realized Trevor didn't just stalk Annalise but had traumatized all of us. 1 month later, Annalise was working her shift at the mall food court when she noticed someone familiar. Trevor was sitting at a table in the dining area just staring at her. He didn't order food or approach the counter. He just sat there watching her for 3 straight hours until a customer complained to security. When mall security confronted him, he claimed he was just eating lunch and had no idea she worked there. This was despite Annalise wearing a bright orange uniform with the restaurant's logo on it. Security called the police and Trevor was arrested for violating the restraining order. The prosecutor added witness intimidation charges after reviewing the mall security footage. At the hearing, Trevor's father's attorney argued this was excessive punishment for a lovesick teenager. The judge reviewed Trevor's pattern of escalation and inability to respect boundaries. She revoked his bail immediately and ordered him held pending trial. Trevor started screaming Annalise's name as court officers dragged him out of the courtroom. His voice echoed down the hallway until the doors slammed shut. 6 weeks later, Annalise started receiving letters at her house even though Trevor was in jail. The letters came through other inmates' girlfriends who mailed them from outside. They contained poetry about their eternal bond and disturbing drawings of their future children. One letter included a detailed floor plan of Annalise's house with notes about which windows had broken locks. Her dad called Detective Rivera immediately, and they installed a complete security system that night. The next morning, Trevor's cellmate contacted authorities with a recording he'd made on a contraband phone. In it, Trevor offered him $5,000 to take care of me for ruining everything. The recording captured Trevor describing how I manipulated Annalise against him and needed to be removed from the equation. The FBI officially opened an investigation into conspiracy to commit murder. My first therapy session with a trauma specialist happened 3 days after the FBI interview. She explained how I'd been in survival mode for weeks, which explained why I couldn't eat or sleep normally. We talked about the guilt I felt for not seeing Trevor's true nature sooner. I told her how I'd introduced him to my friend group where he found Annalise. The therapist reminded me that predators are skilled at deception, and it wasn't my fault. Meanwhile, Mrs. Acteel went up to their attic looking for Christmas decorations and found Trevor's hidden laptop. Well, hello darkness, my old friend. Trevor's mom just found the laptop stash upstairs while hunting for Christmas decorations. Nothing says holiday spirit quite like discovering your son's secret stalker computer between the tinsel and tree lights. It contained thousands of photos of Annalise organized by date in folders labeled things like future wife and mother of my children. There were edited images of them together at weddings and disturbing photoshopped pregnancy pictures. She also found receipts for spy cameras and GPS trackers, though the devices themselves were missing. She immediately drove to the police station with a laptop and handed it directly to Detective Rivera. 3 days later, someone keyed liar into Annalise's car while it was parked at school. They also left dead roses on the windshield with a note that said he loved her first. Security footage for those 3 hours was mysteriously corrupted and no one saw anything. That same afternoon, similar dead roses appeared at my aunt's house on the doorstep. Rose found them in her locker after volleyball practice. Mia's manager called to say someone left them at her job's front desk. All the cards had the same message about Trevor loving Annalise first. We realized with growing horror that Trevor had supporters who were now targeting us. That Monday morning, my phone started blowing up with notifications from a Reddit thread someone sent me titled 20 Attention Seekers Destroy Innocent Guy's Life Over a Crush. The post had already hit the front page with 15,000 upvotes and growing fast. Someone had posted all our Instagram profiles, full names, where we worked, what colleges we went to, everything they could find about us online. The comments were calling us every name you could imagine and worse. My DMs filled with death threats, rape threats, guys saying they'd find me and teach me what happens to girls who ruin men's lives. Rose called me crying because someone had posted her parents' business info, and people were leaving 1-star reviews saying they raised a lying daughter. Mia's boss got calls demanding she be fired for participating in entrapment. The thread kept growing with new theories about how we planned the whole thing, how Trevor was just socially awkward, how we took advantage of a lonely guy who didn't understand boundaries. 3 days later, Annalise texted our group chat that she needed someone to walk with her to the library because she was scared to go alone. I met her outside the science building and we walked together. But when we got to the library, 3 guys from Trevor's fraternity were waiting by the entrance. They followed us inside, one of them recording on his phone while another kept asking Annalise why she was lying about Trevor. She tried to walk past them to the study rooms, but the biggest one stepped in front of her, blocking the path. Just admit you led him on, he said while his friend kept filming. Annalise's hands were shaking as she tried to go around him, but he moved to block her again. The librarian saw what was happening and called campus security, but by the time they arrived, the video was already uploaded with the title, Crazy Girl Can't Keep Her Story Straight When Confronted. The prosecutor called me that afternoon to say they were adding solicitation of murder charges based on what Trevor's cellmate had told them about the hit he tried to arrange. Trevor's dad finally stopped posting on Facebook defending his son, though the lawyer bills kept getting paid according to what Detective Rivera told us. The judge denied bail completely at the next hearing, calling Trevor a clear danger to the community. His lawyer immediately requested a psychiatric evaluation, claiming his client was having a mental health crisis and needed treatment, not prison. I tried going back to regular classes the next week, but when I opened my locker, someone had taped printed screenshots from Trevor's manifesto all over the inside. The pages highlighted every part where he called me jealous, controlling, unable to handle his emotional depth, saying I was threatened by his connection with Annalise. Nobody saw who did it, even though there were cameras in that hallway. I spent lunch in the counselor's office trying not to cry while she helped me file a report that we both knew wouldn't go anywhere. Detective Rivera called Annalise's parents with news that made everything worse. They'd found the spy cameras Trevor had hidden in their house months ago. One was in the bathroom vent, another in Annalise's bedroom smoke detector. The footage was all uploaded to a cloud account he'd been accessing from the school library computers during his free periods. The timestamps showed he'd watch her getting dressed in real time during his classes, taking screenshots of everything. Her family packed up that night and moved to a hotel, while a security company swept their entire house for more devices. 2 weeks into his psychiatric hold, Trevor attacked a psychiatrist evaluating him when she suggested his feelings for Annalise weren't real love but obsession. He broke her nose and gave her a concussion before the guards pulled him off, screaming that nobody understood their connection, that Annalise was meant for him, that the psychiatrist was just another jealous woman trying to keep them apart. His lawyer tried to spin it as proof he needed mental health treatment, but the prosecutor added assault charges packages to the growing list. The anonymous packages started arriving the next week. Mine came to my parents' house, a box of lingerie in Annalise's size with a note saying Trevor had bought these for her and I'd made her reject them. Rose opened hers at work and found a USB drive with deepfake porn someone had made of Annalise. Mia got pages and pages of fanfiction Trevor had written about him and Annalise, describing things that made us all feel sick. Every package had the same postmark from our zip code, but no return address, no fingerprints, nothing traceable. Annalise's parents pulled her out of school completely after that. She told me during one of our phone calls that she hadn't slept through a whole night since they found the cameras, that she showered in a swimsuit now, that she deleted all her social media and was thinking about legally changing her name. Her therapist diagnosed her with complex PTSD and started her on medication just so she could function. She was already looking at colleges in other states, planning to disappear completely after graduation. The protest happened on a Tuesday morning. About 30 men standing outside our school with signs about false accusations ruining lives, demanding justice for Trevor, calling us liars and worse. They surrounded Annalise's mom's car when she came to pick up Annalise's transcripts from the office, banging on the windows and screaming that her daughter was destroying an innocent man's life. Campus security stood there watching until local police finally showed up to move them across the street, but nobody got arrested even though they'd been trespassing and harassing people. The DA called me to testify about the plea deal meeting where they offered Trevor 5 years for stalking and 2 for solicitation with mandatory psychiatric treatment. His lawyer wanted him to take it, but Trevor refused, insisting he needed a trial so he could tell his side and make Annalise understand they were meant to be together. When his dad tried to convince him to take the deal, Trevor called him a traitor and said he was just like everyone else who couldn't see real love. That same afternoon, I got home from school to find my aunt's front door wide open and every single picture frame turned backwards. My hands shook as I walked through the house checking each room for whoever broke in. Nothing was stolen, but something was way worse. Every photo of me from baby pictures to prom was gone, replaced with printed photos of Annalise from her old Instagram. The printer in my room was still warm with paper scattered everywhere showing her face over and over. My laptop was open to her deleted Facebook from 3 years ago with someone having scrolled through hundreds of her photos. They'd made themselves a sandwich in the kitchen and left the dirty knife on my pillow with peanut butter still on it. I called the cops while running outside and throwing up in the bushes. 2 days later, the FBI agent showed me screenshots from Reddit where a group calling themselves Trevor's Army had been planning this for weeks. They'd made a whole documentary about how we ruined an innocent man's life with our female hysteria and started a crowdfunding page for his defense. The fund hit $50,000 in 3 days with comments about teaching us a lesson. Trevor's dad returned all the money the next morning and told reporters he wanted nothing to do with these people. Mrs. Teal called a meeting with all our families at the community center that weekend. She brought boxes of documents including notes from Trevor's childhood therapist when he was 12, warning about obsessive behaviors. His dad had refused more treatment and called it overreaction to normal boy stuff. She showed us recordings she'd secretly made of her husband coaching Trevor to lie about the stalking. She was divorcing him and would testify for the prosecution with everything she had. I tried going back to normal over the next few weeks, but kept seeing Trevor in every stranger's face. My grades dropped from A's to D's, and I quit debate team after having a panic attack during practice. I broke up with the guy I'd been talking to from college before we even had our first date. Mom found me at 3 in the morning researching how to legally change my name and disappear completely. The pre-trial hearing was worse than I imagined when Trevor's lawyer stood up and said we should be charged with revenge porn. He argued we distributed sexual content of Trevor without consent, even though Trevor made the videos himself. The judge watched all 3 minutes of the compilation, while the whole courtroom stayed silent. She ruled they didn't meet the legal definition since Trevor created and sent them voluntarily. Why does Trevor's dad suddenly return $50,000 from supporters when he's been paying legal bills this whole time? Something shifted there that makes me wonder about the family dynamics. Trevor jumped up screaming that we were all in on it together and the judge was probably fucking one of us. 2 bailiffs dragged him out while he kept yelling and the judge held him in contempt. Rose's sister, who worked IT, found something even worse on her lunch break the next week. Trevor had been running a Discord server called Tada's Future with 12 members who shared Annalise's photos. They used code names, but one guy messed up and called Trevor by his real name in a voice chat. The FBI subpoenaed Discord and found detailed plans they called acquisition strategies for getting Annalise alone. Principal Edwards called a mandatory assembly about appropriate relationships and respecting boundaries 2 weeks later. Halfway through his speech, the AV system started playing audio from Trevor's jailhouse calls. His voice filled the gym saying he'd always love Annalise and would make me pay for keeping them apart. Someone had hacked the whole system, and at the end, a distorted voice said, "Free Trevor," before cutting out. Parents started pulling their kids out of school and demanding better security, while teachers tried to calm everyone down. Detective Rivera called us into the station that afternoon with news that made everything worse. 2 of the Discord members were local and had been watching Annalise for months. One worked at the mall food court where she ate lunch, and the other was a substitute teacher at our school. The FBI arrested them both in coordinated raids at 6 in the morning. The substitute had blueprints of Annalise's house taped to his wall with her work schedule written in red marker. The mall guy had hundreds of photos he'd taken of her eating alone at the food court. The 20 girls from the sleepover started meeting for group therapy every Thursday at the community center. We sat in a circle talking about how we couldn't trust anyone anymore and jumped at every noise. The therapist helped us understand we weren't responsible for what Trevor and his followers did. We made a pact to go to each other's graduations no matter where life took us after this. 3 days before the trial, Trevor's dad got arrested for witness tampering after approaching Annalise's family with a briefcase full of cash. He'd offered them $100,000 to drop the charges and move out of state immediately. He'd also contacted 3 other girls' parents with the same offer, saying he'd rather pay than watch his son go to prison. Mrs. Teal had been recording him the whole time and gave the FBI everything, including him saying Trevor just needed to get this out of his system. The FBI took that recording straight to the judge and added witness tampering charges on top of everything else. 18 weeks later, we were finally starting jury selection for Trevor's trial, and watching his lawyer reject every single young woman who got called up was making me sick. The prosecutor fought back by challenging any older guy who looked like he might think Trevor was just some lovesick kid. It took 2 whole weeks just to find 12 people who could sit on the jury. Trevor sat at the defendant's table the entire time drawing pictures on his legal pad, and when I walked past during a break, I saw they were all sketches of Annalise's face. The day after we finally got a jury seated, threatening letters started showing up at jurors' houses warning them about convicting an innocent young man who was being destroyed by lying females. One juror found a dead rat in their mailbox with a note saying this would be them if they voted guilty. The judge immediately sequestered the whole jury and ordered an investigation into jury tampering. Trevor swore he had nothing to do with it, but the prosecutor got his commissary records from jail, showing he'd been paying other inmates who had people on the outside. On the first day of actual trial, Trevor's supporters packed the gallery wearing matching matching t-shirts with his face on them. When Annalise walked in to testify, they all stood up and turned their backs to her. Someone yelled liar before the bailiffs dragged him out. Annalise started shaking so bad she couldn't even make it to the witness stand. She collapsed right there in the aisle and had to be helped to a chair while she sobbed uncontrollably. The judge cleared the entire courtroom and banned all of Trevor's supporters from coming back. During a recess later that day, I went to the bathroom and heard two jurors talking in there about how boys will be boys, and she probably led him on by not being clear enough. They didn't know I was in a stall listening to every word. I told the prosecutor immediately, but she said we couldn't do anything unless they specifically said they wouldn't follow the law. That's when it hit me that Trevor might actually walk free after everything he'd done. On day 3 of the trial, Annalise had to testify for 6 straight hours about every single thing Trevor had done to her over the years. His lawyer kept interrupting to suggest she enjoyed the attention and pointed out that she never blocked his number at first. When the prosecutor showed the spy camera footage from her bedroom, Annalise threw up right there on the witness stand. The judge called a recess while they cleaned everything up, and I saw Trevor smirking at his lawyer like this was all going according to plan. The next day, it was my turn to testify about our relationship and Trevor's obsession with Annalise. His lawyer called me a jealous ex who was trying to punish Trevor for emotional infidelity, like that was even a real thing. When I described finding all those photos of Annalise on his computer, Trevor looked right at me and mouthed, "You're dead." The judge didn't see it, but the court reporter did, and typed it into the official record. Then Mrs. Teal took the stand against her own son and pulled out journals from when Trevor was 14, showing he'd done this exact same thing to another girl who ended up moving away. Trevor jumped up screaming that she was a traitor bitch and tried to lunge at his own mother. It took 4 bailiffs to pin him down while he kept screaming and spitting. The jury finally got to see what he was really like under all that fake charm. His lawyer asked for a mistrial, but the judge said no way. The prosecution spent the next day presenting all their evidence, including the spy camera footage, the Discord server messages, and the recording of Trevor trying to hire someone to hurt me from jail. The FBI agent testified about the whole network of stalkers who were sharing information about Annalise online. Trevor's lawyer argued he was manipulated by older predators online and was actually a victim himself. I wanted to scream when I saw some jurors nodding like they were actually buying it. During a break the next week, Annalise told me she'd been accepted to a college across the country under a completely different name. She was legally changing everything, dyeing her hair, and starting over from scratch. She said even if Trevor went to prison, she'd never feel safe in Riverside again. Her parents were selling their house at a huge loss just to help her disappear completely. Then Trevor decided to take the stand against his lawyer's advice and talked for 3 straight hours about his pure love for Annalise and how we'd all poisoned her against him. He admitted to everything but kept insisting it was romantic, not criminal. He said the videos were love letters she misunderstood and that he was just trying to show her how much he cared. When the prosecutor asked about trying to hire someone to hurt me, he said I deserved it for interfering with true love. The prosecutor stood up slowly and walked right up to Trevor, asking if Annalise ever actually loved him back. Trevor's face went red and he started screaming that she was too damaged to know what she wants, and he was fixing her. The whole courtroom went silent when the prosecutor asked if he thought he owned her, and Trevor actually said she belongs with me. Even his lawyer put his head in his hands like he knew it was over. After court ended, we were walking to the parking lot when we heard glass breaking and saw someone had thrown a brick through Annalise's mom's windshield with a note that said, "Drop the charges or lose more than glass." Security cameras caught a person in a mask, but the way they walked looked exactly like Trevor's dad, and when cops went to question him, his girlfriend gave him an alibi, but kept looking at the ground the whole time. 3 weeks later, we were back for closing arguments, and the prosecutor called Trevor a dangerous predator who went from stalking to trying to hire someone to hurt me, while the defense lawyer blamed social media and video games and said we were cruel for rejecting him. The jury went to deliberate, and we waited 3 whole days where I couldn't eat or sleep and jumped every time my phone went off, while Annalise stayed in a hotel under a fake name with Rose organizing shifts so she was never alone. When the jury came back, they found him guilty on everything except attempted murder, which they changed to criminal threats, and Trevor started screaming that the jury was brainwashed and told Annalise this isn't over while his dad stormed out and his mom just sat there crying. 2 weeks later at sentencing, the judge gave Trevor 12 years with possible parole and 7+ lifetime restraining orders, and Trevor talked for 40 minutes about how Annalise ruined his life and we were evil feminists until the judge said his complete lack of remorse meant no early parole. His dad held a press conference calling Trevor a political prisoner and victim of Me Too hysteria and said he was funding an appeal and documentary, but within hours his law firm fired him for reputational damage and his girlfriend left him, and Mrs. Teal's divorce went through that same week. 2 weeks after that, the substitute teacher from Trevor's group got found not guilty because there wasn't enough evidence and he went back to teaching, so Annalise's family sued the school district and parents protested while the teacher smirked at us during a school board meeting, knowing he got away with it. Trevor's dad offering $100,000 to make this go away tells you everything about where Trevor learned his problem-solving skills. Apparently the apple doesn't fall far from the really messed up tree. 6 months later, I started college early through dual enrollment just to get away from high school, and my new classmates didn't know about Trevor, so I started feeling normal again, even though I still check locks all the time and can't date anyone, and my therapist keeps saying healing isn't linear, which I sometimes believe. Then Mrs. Teal sent us each a letter, apologizing with checks for therapy costs, and told us she moved to another state and changed back to her maiden name, and works at a domestic violence shelter now, and included a photo of herself at a survivors rally holding a sign that said, "Believe women," which felt like some kind of closure. 6 months passed, and I was finally starting to sleep without nightmares, when Rose texted our group chat with a news link that made my stomach drop. Channel 7 had done this whole investigation into online stalking networks, and found Trevor's old Discord friends had made a new server with over 200 members who were sharing our photos and addresses, and calling us the Riverside 20 like we were some kind of terrorist group. The reporter showed screenshots where they were planning something big for the 1-year anniversary of Trevor's arrest, and had detailed information about which colleges we'd applied to and where our parents worked. My mom was watching from the couch and grabbed my phone to see the screen and immediately called the FBI agent who'd handled our case before, while my dad started installing new locks on all the doors. The agent came to our house that night with 2 other officers and told us they were reopening the investigation, but we needed to take immediate safety precautions and vary our routines and basically live like we were being hunted. Rose's sister who worked IT came over the next day with a whole setup of laptops and started making us all new email accounts with encrypted everything and teaching us about VPNs and how to lock down our social media so tight that even our own parents couldn't find us online. 3 of the girls from the sleepover had already transferred schools, and 5 changed their legal names through the court system, and Annalise had completely vanished months ago without telling anyone where she she went. We created this private network to share safety updates and warning signals, and basically turned ourselves into our own witness protection program without any actual government help. The anniversary date got closer, and the school brought in extra security guards, and our parents organized neighborhood watch patrols, and the police promised they'd have unmarked cars circling the area. The Discord group went completely silent 3 days before, which was somehow worse than the threats, because at least when they were posting, we knew what they were planning. All 20 of us stayed home that day with our doors locked and phones ready to call 911, and nothing happened, but the waiting and fear was so exhausting that Sarah threw up from anxiety, and Mia's mom had to take her to the hospital for a panic attack. We realized they'd won without even doing anything, just by making us live in constant fear of what might happen next. A month later, this guy showed up at the prison where Trevor was being held, claiming to be a documentary filmmaker who wanted to interview him about wrongful conviction, but the guards found a wire in his jacket and discovered he was actually from the Discord group, trying to get Trevor to say something they could use against us. Trevor apparently didn't fall for it, but the recording still leaked online where he talked about dreaming about Annalise every night and knowing she'd wait for him and how their love was eternal, which made me physically sick to hear. Around the same time, I got my college acceptance letter from a school 3 states away with a full scholarship, and the admissions committee wrote this note about how my essay on surviving trauma and finding strength in sisterhood had moved them to tears. I wanted to be excited but felt guilty about leaving the other girls behind until Rose came over and sat with me while I cried and reminded me that surviving meant moving forward, not staying frozen in the past. That's when Annalise sent her final message through some encrypted email system that deleted itself after we read it, saying she was safe and in therapy and slowly building a new life, but needed us to never contact her again for her own safety. We all cried reading it, but understood and deleted every trace of her contact information like she asked, even though it felt like losing her all over again. 2 weeks later, the news reported that Trevor's dad had been arrested for hiring a private investigator to find Annalise's new location, but the PI had turned him in instead, and they found evidence on his computer that he'd been funding the Discord group's activities the whole time. His mugshot showed this broken old man who'd lost his job and house and family, all because he couldn't accept that his son was a predator. The FBI used that evidence to coordinate these massive raids across 3 states and arrested 14 Discord members on conspiracy charges, with Trevor named as an unindicted co-conspirator, which added years to his potential sentence. Detective Rivera called to tell us the good news and asked if we'd be willing to speak at a law enforcement conference about our experience to help train other officers about online stalking networks. 12 of us agreed to go and stood in front of 200 cops telling our story and watching them take actual notes and ask real questions about how to protect victims better. The presentation ended with every officer standing up and applauding and promising to take stalking cases seriously, which felt like the first time adults had actually listened to us. Graduation was coming up fast, and we were all different people than we'd been at that sleepover, with harder edges, but also this unbreakable bond that came from surviving something together. We'd gotten matching butterfly tattoos on our wrists the month before to represent transformation through struggle, and even Annalise had somehow gotten one before she disappeared, which we only knew because she'd included a photo in her final message. 2 days before graduation, I was checking my phone during breakfast when Rose started screaming from her laptop. Someone had posted all our real names, new social media accounts, and college plans on what was left of Trevor's old stalking website. The title made my stomach drop. Where are they now? The bitches who destroyed Trevor. There were photos of us walking to class, sitting in coffee shops, even getting into our cars, all taken without us knowing. The FBI traced it back to Trevor's cellmate's girlfriend who'd been following us for weeks, taking pictures and gathering information to post online. The school called an emergency meeting and told us they couldn't guarantee our safety at the regular graduation ceremony. Principal Edwards arranged for us to have our own private ceremony in Rose's backyard, the same place where everything had started with that sleepover. Our parents stood in a circle around us while we got our diplomas, everyone crying and holding each other tight. Principal Edwards pulled us aside afterward and apologized for not protecting us better when everything first happened. We told him we forgave him because staying angry was too exhausting, and we just wanted to move forward. 3 days later, Trevor's mom called me to say she was going to visit him one last time in prison. She went to the visiting room and told him she was testifying in the federal case about his stalking network. Trevor spit at the glass between them and called her the same names he'd called us. She left crying but told us later it was the first time she really saw what he'd become. The federal prosecutor charged Trevor with running the stalking network from prison using coded letters and commissary payments. His lawyer tried arguing he wasn't mentally capable, but the evidence was too strong. They had recordings of his phone calls telling other inmates to handle those bitches, and receipts showing money transfers to people on the outside. During month 9, we got a call that Trevor had tried to kill himself in prison, leaving a note blaming us for destroying his life. He survived, but they put him in the psychiatric wing where his dad tried to get him transferred to a mental hospital instead of prison. The prosecutor promised us the federal charges would keep him locked up no matter what. The investigation uncovered something even worse when they found 3 guys planning to kidnap Annalise and bring her to Trevor when he got out. They had maps of her new town, her work schedule, even a van they'd bought specifically for it. The FBI admitted they hadn't taken the threat seriously enough at first and started creating special task forces for online stalking cases. At Trevor's federal trial, he fired his lawyer and decided to represent himself. He stood up and talked for 3 hours about how women were evil and we were all part of some conspiracy against men. He kept saying Annalise was sending him secret messages through TV shows and that she really loved him. The judge ordered another psychiatric evaluation, but Trevor just screamed that we'd poisoned everyone against true love. His remaining supporters, just 5 people including his dad, held one last protest outside the courthouse. Counter-protesters from other stalking cases showed up and outnumbered them 100 to 1. Someone served Trevor's dad divorce papers from his girlfriend right there at the protest. He fell to his knees crying, finally understanding how defending his son had ruined his own life. The jury only took 2 hours to find Trevor guilty on all federal charges. They added 15 more years to his sentence, to be served after his state time, meaning he wouldn't even be eligible for parole for 20 years. At his final sentencing, Trevor stood up and promised he'd find Annalise when he got out, even if it took 50 years. Something feels strange about Trevor's dad paying for everything behind the scenes while pretending to be shocked. Makes me wonder if his whole breakdown is real, or just another act when he got caught funding those Discord creeps. The judge added lifetime supervised release with no internet access ever. Trevor laughed like a crazy person and said we'd turned the whole world against love. They dragged him out in chains while he screamed Annalise's name over and over until his voice went hoarse. Mrs. Teal called me 3 weeks later while I was packing for spring break, and her voice sounded different, lighter somehow. She told me Trevor's dad got convicted of witness tampering and conspiracy after the feds found out he'd been bribing Discord members to delete evidence. 3 years in in minimum security, but he lost everything that mattered to him, including his law license, both houses, and his entire reputation. She'd already filed for divorce and married this counselor who works with stalking victims, and together they started a foundation for survivor support. She named it the 20 after all of us girls from the sleepover and sent us these little silver bracelets with the number 20 engraved inside. 6 months after the federal trial ended, I was sitting in my dorm room trying to focus on my psych homework when Mia video called me from her pre-law class at UCLA. She looked so different, more confident, telling me how she'd switched majors after everything that happened because she wanted to help victims like us navigate the legal system. Rose hopped into the call from her cybersecurity program at MIT, where she was learning to track predators online and protect people's digital lives. Sarah joined from her therapist training program, and we all just sat there for a minute realizing how Trevor's sickness had pushed us toward helping others. The trauma shaped us into warriors instead of breaking us down. Detective Rivera called me the next week with the final update that the last Discord member had pled guilty, and the entire network was officially dead. She thanked us for our courage and told me our case had changed everything about how law enforcement handles cyber stalking nationwide. 3 states had already passed Annalise laws making stalking penalties way harsher and requiring mandatory psych evaluations for offenders. We'd protected so many future victims without even knowing it. I started dating this guy from my statistics class who knew my whole story because I told him on our 3rd date, and he just held my hand while I talked. Trust didn't come easy, and I still checked all my locks twice and avoided posting on social media, but my therapist helped me understand that Trevor's sickness wasn't my fault or my future. I was learning to live fully again, even if I still jumped at unexpected knocks on my door. 1 year after the federal sentencing, we all met up at Rose's house again in that same basement where everything started. Some girls had changed their names legally, others had moved to new cities, but we all came back for this. We sat in a circle on the same carpet where we'd planned Trevor's destruction and shared our progress like battle scars we'd earned. Mia was clerking for a judge who specialized in stalking cases. Rose had helped the FBI crack 2 trafficking rings. Sarah was counseling assault survivors. We raised our red solo cups to toast Annalise wherever she was and hoped she'd found peace. We survived because we had each other, and that bond was stronger than any trauma. Mrs. Teal sent us photos from her foundation's first fundraiser where they raised $100,000 in one night. She'd turned Trevor's story into a cautionary tale that parents shared with their kids and schools used in safety presentations. His legacy wasn't the terror he caused, but the change we created from his ashes. I graduated college with honors, and my thesis on stalking networks and survivor advocacy won 3 awards, including a national recognition. During my presentation to 200 people, I noticed this girl in the back row crying and shaking. After I finished, she came up to me with her phone out, showing me texts from her ex that looked exactly like Trevor's. Mia and Rose, who'd flown in for my graduation, immediately surrounded her, and we spent the next 3 hours in a coffee shop helping her file reports and get a restraining order. The cycle of sisterhood kept going stronger than ever. 5 years passed since that Galentine's sleepover, and our group chat stayed active every single day. Some of us got married to people who understood our story, some focused on careers, some were still in therapy working through it all. Nobody mentioned Trevor's name anymore because he'd become just a footnote in our bigger stories. We'd taken back our narratives and written ourselves as the heroes. My lawyer forwarded me a letter from federal prison that Trevor had somehow sent through the system claiming he was cured and wanted to apologize. She shredded it without me reading a single word because that was our standing agreement. I didn't need his apology or his understanding because my healing was never about him realizing what he did wrong, but about me taking back my power. Tonight, I'm hosting my own Galentine's party with 20 women in my apartment, some survivors I'd met through advocacy work, some allies who supported us, all warriors in their own ways. As we paint each other's nails and share our stories, I realize we transformed our worst nightmare into our greatest strength. Trevor tried to destroy us with his sick obsession, but we destroyed him with our solidarity and sisterhood. We're not victims anymore and never will be again. We're survivors who saved each other and keep saving others every single day. That's gonna do it for today. Thanks for hanging out and letting me toss in my little bits of wordplay. Hopefully they weren't too bad. Subscribe for more content like this.